Welcome to a new episode of the Commodity Super Cycle. It's 6 a.m. in Sydney and 10 p.m. in Germany. Marcelo got up really early and I stayed up very late. I'm tired, I can tell you that. So we do everything to bring you the best content available on commodities on Earth, actually. So Marcelo Lopez is a guy who bets his savings and career on uranium. Yes, you heard it right. I think you even mentioned around 70% you're invested in uranium, aren't you, Marcelo?
Yep. Well, it was 70% when I started. Today is way more than that because of the share price appreciation.
Yeah. So additionally, you stated that the market cap of all uranium equities amounts to roughly $20 billion, which is ridiculous. You noted an investor can buy all of a key power source for about 1/35th in the valuation of Tesla, which is crazy. So yeah, this is Marcelo Lopez from Brazil right now in Australia. So please give us a little background about you. Who is Marcelo Lopez?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Mark, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. I am a mechanical engineer and I did a trainee program at Lloyd's Bank in Brazil in the late 90s. Lloyd's was an investment bank at that time, and I always liked the stock market. So I went to a brokerage company close by every lunchtime to learn more about stocks. So when the Russian crisis happened and the long-term capital management collapsed, Brazilian stocks crashed big time.
Yeah.
And I thought it was the best time to start an investment fund focused on Brazilian equities. So I resigned from Lloyd's Bank and started my first investment fund at the end of 1998. And I did really well with this fund. It was a huge success. It returned over 200% to investors in just over a year and a half, maybe. And I tell people it wasn't because it was a genius, but the opportunity was just too great.
Yeah.
And soon I believe we're going to talk about another great opportunity
Definitely.
just before our eyes. But anyway, at that time, some Brazilian equities were trading for less than the cash they had in the bank. And I'm talking about profitable companies that pay double-digit dividends and all that. So after this fund, I thought the market was a bit toppy and I needed more knowledge. So I returned the money to investors and I went to Spain to do my MBA. And after the MBA, I went to Finland to do a specialization in finance. And after Finland, I moved to London and I worked for a big hedge fund focused on emerging markets called Gartmore until the end of 2006. My job at Gartmore was to look for opportunities in emerging markets to invest in. And at the end of 2006, I believe I have found another unmissable investment opportunity, which was real estate in Brazil. So again, I left my job and decided to invest in real estate in Brazil. And I co-founded a company that went to grow into one of the biggest real estate firms in Brazil. Today, this company is owned by Julius Baer, and as I said, it's one of the biggest real estate asset management companies in the country. And in 2013, I decided to go back to the financial markets, and I founded L2 Capital, an asset management company. So the idea was to look for opportunities, but instead of focusing on emerging markets, we would look for opportunities and asymmetric investment themes globally. And I believe we're going to talk about nuclear energy and obviously the metal that powers those reactors, which is, to me, the best investment opportunity I've seen in my life.
Yeah. And you mentioned also the most asymmetric trade you've ever seen in your life. But before we get to uranium, so how did you end up in Australia, actually? How is the situation there right now with COVID and everything? So tell us something.
Oh, I think, I'm in Sydney, New South Wales, and it looks like COVID didn't show up here at all. Life goes on as normal. People are going to the shopping malls, going to the restaurants. Kids are at school. I think school was suspended last year for a couple of weeks, if that. But life is normal, I can tell you that. It's a blessed country.
And you ended up in Australia because of the yellow cake?
This was personal reasons. We ended up moving here a few years ago, and we stay here, personal reasons.
All right. Okay, perfect. So yeah, let's dip into the uranium sector. So remember, we're talking to a German audience, and we shut down all, or we will shut down all nuclear plants. So this is something totally crazy. So give us an elevator pitch. Why are you so excited about uranium and nuclear power?
Sure. Let me talk about the benefits of nuclear energy, because as you mentioned, Germany has decided to shut down all its nuclear power plants. And I think it's important for people to know what the benefits are so they can at least weigh the situation, right? So nuclear energy is clean energy, and it provides reliable, abundant, and safe energy, unlike most people would think. Nuclear energy is just the best and most advanced form of energy ever invented. So if the world is really serious about the environment, nuclear must be a part of the solution. The idea is very simple, although the execution is complex, but you basically split an atom and it generates energy to heat water that powers a turbine that will generate electricity. So if you compare nuclear to other sources of energy, nuclear energy just kills all of them. In any way, shape, or form you look at it, it's better than the other forms of energy. It has more energy density. So, and I have even these noted here, just to mention to you, because I knew we were going to talk about it. But firewood, when you burn firewood, you generate 16 megajoules per kilo.
Yeah.
When you burn coal, you generate 23 megajoules per kilogram. Diesel, it's a big improvement. It's 44 megajoules per kilogram. And uranium is 3,900 gigajoules per kilo. So it's almost 100,000 times better than the others. In terms of safety, which is an item that most people would like to discuss, nuclear again comes way ahead. I actually used this data in my presentation to investors, and I got it from the US Energy Information Administration. You have on one extreme coal with 100,000 deaths per trillion kilowatt hour, and on the other one you have nuclear with less than 100. So the comparison is cruel, and I'm sure we end up going to talk about the two major accidents, Fukushima and Chernobyl. But let me just talk about the other things before. If the subject is reliability, surprise, surprise, nuclear also comes ahead. Nuclear reactors work most of the time with plant shutdowns for refueling and maintenance, which is now happening every 18 months in a few reactors. So a nuclear reactor can provide clean energy with a capacity factor of over 93%. Natural gas is less than 60%, coal is less than 50%, wind is just over 30%, and solar energy has a capacity factor of 25%, if that. People think that the so-called renewables, wind and solar, will be able to save the planet, but they are highly unreliable. They need a backup, and as the sun does not shine all the time, the wind does not blow all the time. And you would be surprised, Mark, to know that the big oil companies like Total, BP, Chevron, and all that, they spend billions of dollars in supporting solar and wind. And you might ask, oh, why is that? Aren't they shooting themselves in the foot? But the reality is that they know the so-called renewables are not reliable and they need a backup. In this case, a dirty backup, being it natural gas or oil or even coal. So the more money people spend on these so-called renewables, more power they will give to fossil fuel producers. Now let's talk about land requirements. Solar panels in general need an area of up to 400 times bigger to produce the same amount of electricity as nuclear. They demand 18 times more steel and produce 300 times more hazardous waste. Imagine the impact of this kind of construction in the natural landscape. The human footprint is devastating. And not only steel, you spend way more on concrete, on rare earths and other materials, making it not only a pollutant, but also expensive. And I'm not even going to mention that wind and solar rely heavily on government subsidies. They are still pollutants. The wind can also kill rare birds, bats. They can be noisy. Their productivity decays very rapidly with the passage of time, and they have to be disposed somewhere, creating more toxic rubbish. And as far as I know, there's not a proper place for these items to be disposed. Another thing, people think that they will use batteries and that will solve all the problems. But the issue here is base load. It doesn't matter if your car runs on batteries. If you recharge those batteries using the electricity that was produced using coal, you're actually polluting more, way more, I should say. You'd better off owning a diesel car.
Yeah.
Now, I said to people that the so-called renewables, wind and solar, are unreliable. And what many people do not realize is that it increases the cost of electricity and increases the risks to the grid. So bear with me. Let me try to explain this a little further, just to make it easy. So sorry about the oversimplification, but electricity produced now is being consumed now. It can't be consumed tomorrow, next week, or next month. It has to be consumed now. So imagine a couple of scenarios. The first one, we need electricity now, but the wind is not blowing, the sun is not shining. So what are we going to do? Well, we have to turn on the backup, which is normally gas or coal. So the idea that you are not polluting, just go through the window. But there's a different scenario, which is not good either, and no one talks about. And that's when you don't need electricity now, but the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. So now you have to dispose this electricity somehow. And first you have to shut down whatever source of energy is feeding the grid, and you have to do it in a haste. So imagine you have a coal plant or gas or even nuclear. They have to shut down so the grid can use the electricity provided by the so-called renewables. In California, and I'm pretty sure it has happened in Germany too, a few times, but you might be able to check this but they needed electricity at a certain period of time, and the sun was not shining and the wind was not blowing. So they have to buy expensive electricity from nearby states.
France.
Even worse, when they can produce electricity from these so-called renewables, and they don't need the electricity, they have to sell it to someone else.
Or
what
even,
if no one
Marcelo,
wants it?
I have to interrupt you. In the southern part of Germany, we even paid other countries that they would take our electricity because we didn't want to danger the grid. You know, it's crazy, it's insane.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's a complete nonsense. In California, it happens over and over again. And people don't understand why the electricity bills are so high. And, you know, and the pollution goes up too, because the backup has to be turned on. And you increase the risk to the grid. So anyway, Mark, whichever way you look at nuclear energy, it comes way ahead of the others. Now, the field that nuclear really loses is the information battle. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and people just don't want to see it. And that's the problem. And I believe people have to educate themselves, and that's what we're doing here, right? We're bringing new information so people can think about those issues independently and stop accepting being spoon-fed misleading information.
Yeah, that's why I was so keen talking to you, to give the people financial intelligence, to have an insider who is really deep in the topic, and we talk about some points somebody else never mentioned, the media or the politicians.
Sure. Listen, I for once, I was against nuclear energy. I thought those nuclear reactors could explode and kill everyone around. But
same here.
But they only explode on TV series.
Yeah. So yeah, but the critics always come with Chernobyl, they come with Fukushima. So what do you reply to them if they say, hey, but they can blow off, they can explode and can waste all the country and all the people?
Yeah. Well, they do say that actually, but people talk about Fukushima, and I say that Fukushima is the best reason why we need to have more nuclear reactors. Almost 20,000 people died because of the tsunami. Around 1,000 people died because of the evacuation process. And no one, zero, had any injuries because of the nuclear accident. And it somehow, it's interesting to see because Fukushima just entered the map because of the nuclear accident. But the nuclear accident didn't hurt anyone. Actually, nuclear reactors are so safe in Japan that, and they are so well built that when there's an earthquake, people move closer to nuclear reactors. Now, if we talk about Chernobyl, which was the only nuclear accident in history with victims, and we look at the facts, we are also going to come to the same conclusion. A couple of years ago, I interviewed Dr. Jerry Thomas, who's a PhD and postdoctorate in pathology, and she works for the Imperial College in London. And it was a great conversation. The podcast is actually available in our website to whoever's interested. And I really like to talk to Dr. Thomas because she knows a lot about cancer, molecular pathology, and the health effects of radiation. So she told me that, like many of her friends back then, she was left-wing and she was leaning towards she was actually, she has a lot of prejudice against nuclear energy. So she decided to write about the horribleness that was nuclear energy. And after her research, she fell in love with it. Now she travels around the world to talk to everyone about the benefits of nuclear energy. So here are the facts. 134 people died because of the fire. So these were people who were there at the time of the accident, or people who arrived soon after, or and these people suffered acute radiation exposure or got burned. The WHO, the World Health Organization, estimates that the increase in thyroid cancer will be around 16,000 people by 2065. So the accident happened more than 30 years ago, and they're projecting another 40 years ahead. If we take these numbers as reality, and there's dispute around them, but we know that thyroid cancer is the easiest curable form of cancer. On average, only 1% of the patients die because of it. So the total death count will get to 160 people overall, over all this period of time. And curiously enough, thyroid cancer treatment is based on doses of radiation. So there's a story of what happened and what happened. And the story is obviously way more interesting. I've heard this phrase a while ago, and I love it. And it goes like that. Don't you hate when the facts get in the way of a great story? Now, people claim that nuclear energy it's bad, but it actually has saved millions of lives by preventing the burning of fossil fuels. You probably heard me saying that before, but I like to compare it to sharks and insects. Insects kill more than 600,000 people every year on average around the world, being it from transmission of diseases, allergies, or poison, or whatever. But if we talk about sharks, now guess how many people on average around the world die every year because of a shark attack?
I think it's 5 or 15.
10.
Okay,
people.
Look, hey, I was good.
Yeah, you were very good, very good. But when it happens, it's a big thing. People close the beaches, politicians come up with all sorts of proposals and new regulations, put nets on the sea to protect swimmers and all that. But they are quite tranquil around insects that kill 60,000 people, 60,000 times more people.
Yeah.
It's their reality versus the perception, right? And also, I think there's a high association between nuclear reactors and nuclear bombs, which are completely different things. But people get scared, and
Sure.
I believe the first step is to educate people.
Yeah.
I think Germany suffers with this way more than other countries for historical reasons. And obviously this weighted a lot on German sentiment. And well, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But
No, not.
Yep.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. It's insanity what happened here because of Fukushima, and I hope we step back from this idiotic plan to switch off all the nuclear plants and get in more dependency from other countries and buy expensive electricity from Czech Republic or France, and they create this electricity from coal or oil or gas or nuclear power. That's the thing. And yeah, I just hope we will stepped back. So which countries are the most focused ones on nuclear energy?
Well, I think the growth is coming from China mostly, but Asia is where the action is happening. People tend to look at the Western world and think that nuclear is a dying industry, but it's actually a growth industry, and it's booming in Asia. China is building a fleet of nuclear reactors. If I'm, they are building on average 6 nuclear reactors every year, and they're going to keep up this growth until 2025, and then they will scale it up. According to the Tsinghua University, China has to grow its nuclear fleet by 382% by 2060 to achieve the goals that they want to achieve to be carbon neutral. So it's an impressive growth, and same thing with India, Russia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Argentina, Egypt. Many of these countries are building nuclear reactors, but people tend to focus on Europe and the US and think it's a dying industry. It's not. It's a growth industry.
Yeah, definitely is. So, and it's necessary for the green revolution we have now to reach the goals of the Paris Treaty. We need actually nuclear energy. So, I hope Germany will see this as well soon. So, I've got 2 big concerns. We already talked about security, because all the critics bring always the security point, and of course the waste, the radioactive waste. So please give me your thoughts on this.
Sure. No, that's a good point. It's worth mentioning, and talking about nuclear waste. I think this is one of the sell points for nuclear, honestly, and by a mile. First of all, let's clarify this. We shouldn't call it nuclear waste, because the vast majority of the spent fuel can be recycled and enter the fuel cycle again. So let's call it spent fuel. Now, if you put together the spent fuel produced in the world since the 60s until today, you won't be able to fill 2 soccer fields. Because uranium has a very high energy density, the spent fuel is minuscule compared to other sources. Another very important thing, you tell me, what other source of energy produces waste that is contained? Where's the waste from the coal plants or the gas plants? It's in our lungs, and 7 million people die every year because of pollution. More people dying in Japan of pollution caused by the closure of the nuclear reactors than because of the accident itself. And they are continuing to die thanks to fossil fuels. Now, so to have a waste that is minimal, secured, and contained, to me, is one of the selling points of nuclear energy.
Yeah. So what about the progress in technology? There are new forms of what's it called? I think mini reactors. So can you tell something about that?
Small modular reactors, right?
Pardon me?
Small modular reactors, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, small modular reactors are a type of reactor that is smaller and manufactured somewhere and assembled on site. So this one has a few advantages over the normal nuclear reactor. So first of all, you need less capital to assemble one. That's pretty good. Secondly, they are considered way safer than normal designs. Thirdly, they can be put in places that cannot accommodate big nuclear reactors. And I think people will accept them more. They are scalable too, meaning that you can build more than one of these SMRs in the same place, increasing the power generation capacity. And the time you spent on construction is also much less.
Sure.
So let's say you pre-build a few parts of the nuclear reactor and you just assemble them on site. Now, with SMRs, I believe we are going to achieve a much bigger proportion of nuclear energy produced in the world. This is because people's acceptance to small nuclear reactors will be greater than the acceptance of the big ones.
Okay.
Besides, for entrepreneurs, the cost will go down and makes the returns more enticing. It should be commercially viable from 2027 onwards. So we're talking about the second half of this decade.
Okay, cool. What about thorium? People talk about thorium.
Yeah, there hasn't been any commercially viable reactor that powered by thorium that I know of. So thorium has been talked about for many years, but again, it's a technology that's years ahead, if it ever comes to be developed.
What about the reactors who can use the radioactive waste again to create energy?
Yeah, well, that would be great for it, because the spent fuel will be recycled, and it happens already in certain parts of the world. France and Russia, Japan as well. They can treat the spent fuel and put it back onto the nuclear fuel cycle and reuse that. And I think the Bill Gates is trying to develop this technology. A few other companies are doing the same. That would be awesome for the world. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, sure. It would be like a perpetuum mobile. So it would be like never ending. It would be great. So, okay, let's talk about the price. Why is it so damn low? The uranium price dropped 60, 80, 90% even over the last decade. So how is it possible?
Yeah, well, Mark, it was a perfect storm for miners. Everything that could go wrong for them went wrong. Fukushima was obviously the most impactful event. So after the accident, Japan shut down all its nuclear reactors. So the world lost a big buyer of uranium and gained a seller, because Japan started selling part of its inventory. Yes, it was taking delivery of some of the contracts, but it was also active in the spot market. And because Japan has a lot of inventories, it didn't help prices at all. And miners didn't stop mining at that time. They thought Japan would be back online very quickly, and they kept on producing, shooting themselves in the foot, and obviously didn't help the prices at all. Besides, the sentiment was very negative at that time. As I mentioned, Japan shut down all its nuclear reactors. Spain said they were going to shut down all its nuclear reactors too by 2020. Germany in 2022, Belgium in 2025. And on top of that, there were a lot of pressure from environmental groups for politicians to either shut down existing reactors or at least not let any more be built. In addition, Kazakhstan was ramping up its production. In the beginning of the century, Kazakhstan was responsible for less than 10% of the global uranium supply, and now it's around 40%. Moreover, there was a program in place called megatons to megawatts, in which Russia was dismantling part of its nuclear arsenal. They were downblending the highly enriched uranium and selling it to the US. And it was good for Russia because they made some money, and it was great for the US because they not only avoid that this highly enriched uranium fell into the hands of rogue government or a terrorist organization. But they also had plenty of cheap uranium to power their nuclear reactors. It was just bad for the miners. And last but not least, secondary supply and underfeeding were increasing. Now, do you want me to explain what underfeeding is, or?
Yes, please. Just short introduction. Yeah.
Okay, so uranium is found in different isotopes, and the most common is the 238, which corresponds to around 99.3%. Uranium-235 corresponds to 0.7%. And that's the one we want because it's unstable. You can bombard the nucleus, it can explode and generate all the energy. So when people say that they're going to enrich uranium is just to increase the content of the isotope 235 in the mix from 0.7 to 3, 4, 5%, whatever the nuclear reactor needs.
Yeah.
And if you want to build a nuclear bomb, you can enrich uranium to 90% plus. But the way you do it today is using centrifuges. These centrifuges spin at high speeds and they cannot stop. So these enrichers have an incentive to do what's called underfeeding. And underfeeding occurs when you feed less uranium into the centrifuges, hence the name underfeeding.
Yeah.
But these centrifuges spin for longer and they produce the same amount of enriched uranium using less uranium. And that uranium that they didn't use is theirs. So they can go to the market and sell this uranium as long as it makes commercial and financial sense to them. So it is as if they create a whole new mine out of the blue. Now, I have to use this metaphor because it helped me a lot to understand underfeeding when I started. Imagine a miner as being a producer of oranges.
Yeah.
The enrichers will be the guy who's going to squeeze the oranges, and the nuclear reactors are the ones who are going to drink the orange juice. So the thing works like that. The miners give the enrichers 4 oranges. The enrichers squeeze these oranges and give the nuclear reactor 1 glass of orange juice. Now, imagine suddenly that these enrichers have a lot of unused capacity. It was a mixture of new technology with the centrifuges and less demand. Remember, Japan was offline and many other projects got suspended. So now they can take their time to squeeze the oranges. And they realize they don't need to squeeze 4 oranges. They can squeeze really well 3 oranges, and they can produce the same amount of orange juice. And that 1 orange that's left is theirs. So they can just go to the market and sell this extra orange. Yeah. And this extra orange represents underfeeding. So as I mentioned, it was the perfect storm for miners. I mentioned Japan, which was obviously the biggest event, the narrative, Kazakhstan, underfeeding, the miners' lack of discipline, and the megatons to megawatts program. So where are we now? Well, now we are in a whole new world. Japan is back online. There are 9 reactors that have restarted. 3 more should restart this year, and 14 more are waiting for approval to get started. The program, Megatons to Megawatts, is over. It ended in 2013, and I doubt we're going to see anything like it over the next few years.
So this is the reason why you think this is the biggest investing opportunity of our lifetime? So you expect the price will go up?
It is. It's the biggest opportunity I've ever seen in my life in terms of risk return. It's
what do you think? Where will the price go in the next 5 years, in the next decade?
Well, listen, I don't know where the price is going to go, but I know where it has to go. And we mapped every single mine on the planet, and the price has to go to at least $60 a pound.
It's double right now. We're at 30, 32.
I'm sorry?
We are at 30 or 32, I think.
Yeah,
so it would
exactly.
be double at least.
There you go. At least double from here to give miners incentives to start producing again. And what's the incentive for a miner to produce something for $45, $50, or even $60 if they can only be sold for 30, 35? Sure. No one's going to start a mining or even keep a mining producing under those circumstances.
Yeah. So the usual investment pitch goes as follow, actually. The demand for uranium is so high and most uranium miners need a price over $60. So in order to produce profitable, so prices have to go up, actually. So otherwise, most of them will go out of business. So, but is this really the case? Right now, two of the largest uranium mines run by Cameco are shut down, Cigar Lake and McArthur River. What happens if they come back online? Will prices stay low?
Yeah, well, Cigar Lake is actually back online.
Okay, didn't know that. Cool.
Expanded, but the prices. Listen, let's put this into perspective. So sure. Last year, the world consumed almost 180 million pounds of uranium.
Yeah,
and it produced via the miners around 120 million pounds. So there's a huge gap between primary production and consumption. So even if Kazatomprom ramp up production, if Cameco bring back McArthur River and all that, there's still not enough uranium. And remember, Cigar Lake, which is the biggest mine in operation today, will get to the end of its life in another 7 years. And where's the replacement? And who's going to come up to fill up the gap?
Yeah,
there's not many projects that look like they're going to be ready by then.
Wow. Okay. But Marcelo, miners are right now seem a little bit overvalued because, especially a lot of the small developers have risen to a market cap of a couple of $100 million. So even they are like 10 years away from production. So what are your thoughts on this? Did people miss the boat for an investment in the sector, or we're still early?
Yeah, I still believe we are very early in the cycle. Share price have gone up a lot, as you mentioned. Our fund is up by almost 450% over the last 12 months. But I still think it's very early in the cycle. There's going to be a lot of volatility. It's not going to be like that smooth ramp up.
Never is.
But listen, you mentioned this in the beginning of our conversation. Yeah. If you can pretty much buy all the listed companies for around $25 billion. And it's funny because I've been saying that since I started the fund. You say, well, listen, you can buy all listed companies for $8 billion. Oh, yeah. 10.
The funny thing is, when I wrote a whole chapter in my new best-selling book about uranium. And when I started researching it, the whole market cap of the uranium sector was $30 billion. And at the end, when I published the book, it was like 18 billion, but still super cheap. If you look back at the last uranium bull market, we had a market cap of, I think, over 100 billion. So we dropped 140, yeah, even more, yeah. So we dropped like 90%, and it's still crazy. So what is for you the best way to invest into the sector?
Well, there are a few ways that people can get exposure to the sector. There are the physical funds. They can buy Yellow Cake in London. They can buy UPC. And I can talk about UPC a bit more because there's some interesting developments happening there.
Sure, please. Yeah.
So if they don't want to run the risk of the miners, the operational risk and all that, they can buy the physical metal. They can have exposure to the physical metal via these two funds. They can buy the ETFs in the sector, which I caution people to look at them before. They're not as straightforward as most of us would hope. There are the miners themselves, so people can do a little bit of work and decide which ones are the best ones and buy. And again, I would caution people because most of the uranium shares that are traded today will never produce an ounce of uranium. There's a lot of promotion going on, so I urge people to look carefully into this shares. And there's obviously the funds like mine that look for the best investment opportunities within that sector. And
let's talk about your fund. Is it possible to buy it in Europe or in Germany?
It is. The fund is closed now. We open every quarter, so it will be open towards the end of this month. The minimum investment is $250,000 and everyone can buy into the fund, but US investors, unfortunately.
Not. Yeah.
But, well,
so what are the costs? What are the costs of the fund?
It's 1.5% per annum and 20% of performance fee.
Okay, all right. What's your biggest holding right now?
Sorry, Mark, we don't talk about individual stocks or holdings or anything like that.
I can imagine, but okay. So, and what about, would you recommend people to buy mining stocks directly, like a major or mid-tier or junior, or would you say, nah, go better to a fund or buy an ETF?
Sure. Well, I don't recommend anyone to do anything. I'm not in the business of making recommendations, and I can't make a recommendation. But for people who would like to look more into the sector, I think the biggest premium are on the biggest rewards, I should say, are in the miners. The ETFs, they have a few positions that I don't agree with, and some of them have positions that shouldn't be there at all, like Barrick Gold and Macquarie Group and Hyundai Engineering and things that shouldn't be there. So I'll caution people again in regards to the ETFs. And the miners, again, if you have to spend the time to get to know the sector, to get to know which ones are serious and which ones are not, and look at the projects, which ones you think can fly or not, and invest based on that.
Okay. So what about the US? Do you think they will protect and push American uranium miners?
They will. Well, listen, Joe Biden's first act as president was to reintroduce the US to the Paris Accord. And it means that the US has to be carbon neutral by 2050. Now, when you put a date to something, it becomes serious. So if you say, oh yeah, let's chat sometime in the future. Yeah, well, it doesn't mean we're ever going to chat again. But if we say, let's chat next Monday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, boom, then there's a time. And now it's serious, right? Yeah. So the US has to, first of all, save the nuclear plants that are scheduled to be shut down this decade. And we are having, we are seeing this right now in Illinois. There are a couple of plants from Exelon that might be shut down, might not. I hope they won't be shut down. I think they're going to be saved, but let's see. Yeah. So I think the first step is to save the nuclear power plants, and then to give incentive to the miners to produce uranium again. So obviously the most important thing is to save the jobs and to save the clean energy produced by nuclear reactors.
Yeah, okay, cool. So we talked about the bull case, which is really actually great, but let's talk about a potential bear case. So 5 years from now, uranium price is still at $30 on the spot. So what went wrong? Can you think of any scenario where there is no bull market in the coming years?
Yeah, well, I think only if there's a nuclear accident, a nuclear accident will dampen sentiment, and it will most likely delay the recovery in the prices we expect. Now, again, nuclear accidents are not something that happen every day. There were 3 in history, 1 with victims, and this one was a series of errors, one on top of the other. So I don't think we're going to see something like it again. Another risk to consider is China not implementing its plan to build more nuclear reactors. But again, that's not something that worries me too much.
It's unlikely.
Or maybe even a great deposit being found and developed. But how would you develop the deposits at the moment? Who would look at something that would cost 60 or plus to produce just to sell it for $30?
Yeah.
Again, prices have to go up to give miners incentives to produce. And look, even if we assume that there's no more uranium, no more nuclear reactors being built, there's still more demand today than supply. So this imbalance has to be sorted out, and I think the only way is when the prices go up.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, that's good. So Marcelo, I have to sum it up. You're actually the most bullish uranium investor Australia has ever seen, I guess. So final question. You mentioned 70% of your net worth is invested in uranium. So what about the other 30%?
Well, a big chunk of it is in cash. If you take that amount of risk, and again, I don't think it's a big risk when you have those kinds of imbalances. And today is more than 70%. When I started this late 2018, it was 70%. But today the fund went up by so much that it's
much more now. Okay.
Yeah.
There are any other? Sorry.
And we reinvest the proceeds from that we get from the fund into the fund as well. So we invest alongside our investors.
Okay.
And the other 30% I have to put in cash just to to be safe. But I think listen, Mark, it wouldn't make sense for me to find such a great investment opportunity and put 3% of my money into that, because it wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah.
And I had 3 calls in my life that made a difference in my life, which was the stock market in Brazil in the late 90s, the real estate market in Brazil in 2003, 4, 5, and now uranium. And you don't need to have many good calls in your life. With a few, you get there. But as long as you understand them, you understand the risks, you're comfortable with that, and you think they are really disproportionately good, yes, you can bet heavily.
Congratulations for this investment in uranium. So you made it actually. So thank you very much for the interview, for getting up so early in Australia. Any closing thoughts?
Listen, well, first of all, it's not early at all for me. I normally wake up at 4:30. That's one of the benefits of living in Australia. And I have 3 young kids as well, so I've been accustomed to wake up very early for a while now.
Okay.
But Mark, listen, I hope this conversation has been useful to your listeners. I'm always happy to chat, and I think we covered briefly the uranium sector. And again, it's one that I believe investors should look at.
Yep, definitely.
The funny thing about uranium is that if you do a little work, it's worse than doing no work at all.
Yeah.
You probably arrive at the wrong conclusions. You either focus on it and go deeper, or you just leave it aside. Because everything in uranium is different from the other commodities. The buyers, contracts, pricing, cycle, everything. I look at uranium in the beginning of 2017 and thought it was not worth it. Then I really look into it towards the end of 2017 and most of 2018, and I fell in love with the sector. So yeah, that would be my advice to people. And again, Mark, thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to talk to you.
Definitely. It was great talking to you, Marcelo. It's definitely an honor, and I learned so much, and I'm sure all the listeners, all the audience learned a lot, and you helped to create financial intelligence. And I hope we do this pretty soon again. There's so much to talk, and time just went by like nothing. So where can people learn more about you? Are you on Twitter, or just tell us your website? Yeah,
I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, and if people want to discuss the uranium market, I'm always keen to discuss further. It's something I love. It's a passion now, and I went from someone who was against nuclear energy to someone who loves it. So if anyone wants to discuss that, I would be more than happy to do so. Yeah. And we definitely put all the links in the show notes. And my last and definitely final question is,
What is the meaning of life for you, for Marcelo Lopez?
Well, it's to be happy to find something you like and go deep into that, and have some time off to enjoy with the ones you love, family and friends, and that's what we try to do too.
Cool. Listen, Marcelo, it was great talking to you. I learned a lot, and I definitely want to do this again. And thank you very much for your time, for getting up late, not early, and take care. Have a nice one. Bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.